I was lying on the cold tile of my kitchen floor, pickle juice soaking through my shirt, my right arm dead beside me, like it had already decided to leave without me, when I heard my son decide that my stroke was less important than a 9-year-old's piano recital. That phone call lasted less than 2 minutes. 2 minutes to undo 46 years. Stay with me, because what came after that call is the part that still keeps me up at night, though not for the reason you might think. My name is Hollister Greaves. Most people who still care enough to say it gently call me Holly. I am 72 years old, and for 46 of those years, I built Greaves Marine Salvage with my own hands on the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. I dragged shrimp boats off sandbars after hurricanes. I cut steel from wrecked tankers. I turned a muddy yard full of rust and river smell into a company worth more than $18 million on paper by the time I was done. But on that Tuesday in March, none of that mattered. I was alone in my kitchen, making my usual tuna sandwich. Old men trust small routines more than they should. I opened the refrigerator, reached for a jar of pickles, and suddenly the whole room tilted sideways, not slowly, not gently, like the world had rolled 30 degrees and left my body behind. The jar hit the floor and shattered. Vinegar filled the air. Then my right arm stopped obeying me. I tried to push myself up, but that arm just lay there like it belonged to a stranger. My mouth tasted like pennies. The right side of my face felt heavy and warm, like wax starting to pull away from bone. I knew exactly what was happening. My father had died from a stroke at 68. I had been in the room when he went. So I dragged myself toward the phone on the counter. And I called my son. The phone rang 4 times before Cordell picked up. In the background, I could hear piano music, not beautiful music, a child's music. Uneven notes, nervous pauses, a little hand searching for the right keys. My granddaughter, Morel, was 9 years old, and that afternoon was her spring recital. "Dad, what is it?" Cordell said. Not scared, not worried. Annoyed. I tried to say his name, but my mouth would not shape the word properly. My tongue felt too big. My lips felt numb. What came out sounded broken and slurred, the way a man sounds when his brain is losing the thread. "Cordell." There was a pause on the other end. Then my son said, loud enough that I could hear Tansy in the background react, "Dad, are you drunk? Are you seriously drunk in the middle of the afternoon?" I had not touched a drop of alcohol since 1987. Cordell knew that. He knew exactly why. His sister, my daughter Pierrine, was killed by a drunk driver on Highway 90 when she was 16 years old. I quit drinking the day we buried her. I told Cordell that story when he was 12, sitting on our back porch with 2 glasses of root beer between us. He cried that night. He told me he was proud of me. And now, while half my face was sliding and my arm lay useless on the kitchen tile, he called me drunk. I forced one word through my mouth. Help. For 1 second, I thought that would be enough. One clean word. One desperate word, the kind any son should understand. But then I heard Tansy in the background. "Oh my God," she said. "Is he doing this again?" Cordell sighed. He actually sighed. "Dad, I love you," he said, using the tired, managed voice people use when they want patients to pass for kindness. "But I can't drop everything every time you have one of your little episodes. Morel is up next. This is important." I tried again. Stroke. He gave a short laugh through his nose. "Sure, Dad. That's what you said in January when it turned out to be heartburn. Take your pills. Lie down. I'll come by tomorrow. Maybe Thursday." There were no pills. There had never been any diagnosis. That was the story Cordell and Tansy had been building around me, brick by brick and year by year, so that every warning I gave would sound like the boy who cried wolf, so that by the time I truly needed help, I would already sound unbelievable. Then my son hung up. I lay there on the kitchen floor with the phone beside my ear, listening to the dead-tone hum like a flat line at the end of something. For a few seconds, I did not even feel angry. Anger would have required strength, and I had almost none left. What I felt first was shame. A deep old man kind of shame. The kind that crawls into your chest when you understand that you have spent your whole life building a roof over people who would step over you lying in the rain. That boy on the other end of the phone was not a stranger. Cordell was the child I had carried on my shoulders into the Gulf when he was too scared to let the waves touch his knees. He was the boy I drove to football practice every afternoon for 6 years, even during the year my wife was sick and I was working 2 jobs just to keep the business alive. He was the son whose wedding I paid for in cash because Tansy's family had nothing, and my boy wanted to stand proud in front of everybody. I had given him a job title he had never earned. Vice President, $190,000 a year. 11 years on the company books, and I could count on one hand the times he had walked through that salvage yard without needing something from me. I had paid his mortgage when he said he was drowning. I had leased his vehicles through the company. I had paid for my grandchildren's private school tuition because I told myself that innocent children should not suffer for their parents' choices. And still, when I lay on that floor with half my body shutting down, my son heard my broken voice and decided I was embarrassing him. Not dying, embarrassing him. That was the moment I understood something I should have understood years earlier. I had not raised a son who loved me. I had financed a man who tolerated me as long as the checks kept clearing. But I am still here telling this story. And here is why. After Cordell hung up, I understood something terrible and practical at the same time. If I waited for my son, I was going to die on that kitchen floor. So I called 911 myself. It took 3 tries. My left thumb kept slipping on the numbers because my hands were shaking, and my vision had started to blur at the edges. By the time the call connected, I could barely speak. The dispatcher's name was Karine. I remember that, because when a stranger keeps you alive, her name carves itself into your bones. She did not panic. She did not sigh. She did not ask if I was drunk. She just stayed with me. She asked me simple questions, the kind you ask a man whose brain is betraying him. My address, my name, whether I could move my arm, whether I had a dog. I told her I used to have a beagle named Rusty, and she told me her grandmother had one too. So we talked about dogs while I lay in broken glass and vinegar, trying not to close my eyes. By the time the paramedics came through my front door, I no longer knew how much time had passed. They took me to Singing River Hospital, where a nurse named Tabitha became the first person that entire day to look at me like I was still somebody's father. She was close to my age, with a gold cross at her neck and a voice that did not waste words. The doctor said it was an ischemic stroke. Serious, time-sensitive. The next 72 hours would matter most. They needed family present in case decisions had to be made quickly. So they called Cordell again. Tabitha put the call on speaker while she filled out the intake chart. Maybe she did not realize I could hear from the bed. Or maybe she wanted me to hear the truth with my own ears. Tansy answered first. When Tabitha explained that her father-in-law was in critical condition and needed family present, Tansy laughed. Not nervously. Not from shock. She laughed the way someone laughs when a nuisance has interrupted dessert. Then Cordell came on the line and said they had a family thing tonight. My granddaughter's recital after party. He told the nurse to use my Medicare, do whatever they needed to do, and not to call again unless it was absolutely necessary. That was when I saw Tabitha's eyes fill with tears. And that was when a stranger decided I would not face this alone. The friend Tabitha found for me was Buford Tatum. Buford and I had known each other since we were 12 years old, back when both of us believed a fishing pole, a pocket knife, and a muddy riverbank were all a boy needed to get through life. He drove from Mobile to Singing River in 40 minutes flat in a truck that sounded like it had already died twice and changed its mind both times. He signed every paper they placed in front of him. Then he sat beside my bed for 3 days straight. Not because there was money in it, not because anyone would see him do it, but because when a man is truly your friend, he does not need a committee vote to decide whether you matter. On the second night, when I could speak clearly enough to be understood, I asked Buford to call my lawyer. Marquis Boschain arrived at sunrise with coffee, a briefcase, and the kind of face a man wears when he already knows the truth is going to cost something. I told him everything. Cordell's phone call. Tansy's laugh at the hospital. The nurse being told not to call again. Marquis listened without a single interruption. When I finished, he folded his hands on his knee and said quietly, "Holly, there's something your wife prepared 6 years ago." For a moment, I thought the stroke had damaged my hearing. "My wife?" He nodded once. Purine had been gone 2 years by then. Pancreatic cancer took her in 11 weeks, so fast I barely had time to learn how to breathe without her in the room. But somehow, before she left this world, she had seen what I refused to see. She had watched Cordell for years. She had watched Tansy. She had understood exactly what was happening long before I had the courage to name it. Marquis brought me a brown folder and a sealed envelope in her handwriting. Inside was a plan she had quietly called the Lighthouse Provision. She had protected land. She had protected separate money. She had protected a second life for me, in case the people I loved ever turned my devotion into a leash. At the bottom of her letter, in the careful handwriting I had loved for decades, she wrote one line that broke me open. "Holly, if you are reading this, be brave. Walk through the door." I read Purine's letter twice. The first time, I cried because I missed my wife with every nerve still working in my body. The second time, I cried because she had known. She had watched Cordell roll his eyes at me across dinner tables when he thought I was not looking. She had watched Tansy smile at my face while measuring my bank account behind my back. She had seen the way every family holiday invitation came attached to a problem. A mortgage issue, a tuition deadline, a car payment, a business favor, always wrapped in warm family language, always ending with my checkbook open and my mouth closed. And I, fool that I was, had called it love. Purine had called it what it was. A leash. When Marquis came back into the room, I was sitting upright in the hospital bed, with her letter folded on the blanket over my knees. My right hand still barely worked. My face still dragged at the edges. My voice still caught between words. But something inside me had gone very still. Not numb. Clear. Marquis stood by the door and waited. He did not rush me. He did not ask what the letter said. He had the kind of respect that comes from carrying other people's grief in sealed envelopes for years. Finally, I looked at him and said, "Pull the cord." He met my eyes. "All of it?" he asked. "All of it," I said, "today." He nodded once. No speech, no gentle warning about family, no soft little sermon about forgiveness and regret. He simply opened his briefcase, took out a legal pad, and began to write. That was the moment my son lost the father he had mistaken for a wallet. The first call went to my CFO at Grives Marine Salvage. Cordell's partial signing authority was revoked before lunch that day. His title as vice president was terminated for cause. 11 years of drawing a salary he had not truly earned ended with one notarized document and a fax board resolution. Then Marquis contacted the bank. The mortgage I had been quietly paying on Cordell and Tansy's house was no longer my obligation. The automatic payments stopped. A certified letter gave them 30 days to refinance in their own names. For the first time in years, I was not rescuing my son. I was letting him meet himself. The beautiful thing about consequences is that they do not need to announce themselves. They do not shout. They do not send a warning message. They just arrive, quietly, one envelope at a time. By Friday morning of that same week, the leases on Cordell's Lincoln Navigator and Tansy's Audi had been terminated. Both vehicles had been registered through Greaves Marine Salvage as company cars, another quiet luxury I had allowed because I told myself that family should be comfortable. Cordell had always called it a business arrangement. Tansy had called it something she had coming to her. The repossession company waited until they parked at the hospital. I did not ask for that timing specifically. But I will admit something I probably should not. When Marquis told me that Cordell walked out of the hospital entrance and saw his Navigator already loaded onto a flatbed truck, I did not feel guilty. I felt awake, and that hurt more than I expected, because if consequences felt like waking up, it meant I had been asleep for years. Signing papers, smiling at holidays, calling my own blindness devotion. Then came the school tuition. My grandchildren, Myril and little Anders, attended a private Methodist academy in Hattiesburg that cost $28,000 a year per child. I had paid it every August in one lump sum because I loved those children and because somewhere in my chest I still believed that helping them meant helping their parents too. That ended as well. I instructed the bursar that next year's tuition would not be coming from me. Not directly. Not under Cordell's name. Not as another invisible rope keeping him comfortable. But I did not punish the children. I sent a separate private check to the school's hardship scholarship fund with instructions that it be used quietly for any student whose family was struggling. I did not attach my grandchildren's names. I did not demand control over how it was used. I only asked that if Morel or Anders ever needed assistance, it would come through the school and not through their father's performance of gratitude. Because someday, when they are old enough, they will learn the difference. Their parents used them as leverage. Their grandfather protected them from a distance. That was not revenge. That was love with a backbone. Then came the country club, Tansy's kingdom. Magnolia Bayou Country Club was where she posted her brunches and charity luncheons, her golf events and smiling photographs beside women who measured worth in membership dues and handbag labels. I had paid those dues for years. $14,000 a year so my daughter-in-law could have a room where she felt important. Marquis canceled them. Then, in my own name and at my own discretion, I made a substantial donation to the club's building fund and politely requested that Cordell and Tansy's account be marked overdue for the balance remaining. Karma did not knock on their door. It changed the locks. I want to say something here that I mean with every word. My grandchildren did nothing wrong. Myril was 9. Anders was 5. They were children. They did not understand mortgages or company car leases or country club dues or the quiet way adults build lies out of other people's patience. They only knew that their grandfather sent birthday cards, showed up at school fundraisers, and remembered that one of them loved strawberry cake and one of them hated the bread crust on sandwiches. So no, I did not punish the children. I punished the two people who had spent years using them as shields. Cordell and Tansy had a gift for placing the children between themselves and accountability. Whenever they needed money, it was for the kids. Whenever they wanted another favor, it was because the kids deserved stability. Whenever I asked a question, Tansy would soften her voice and mention that she did not want Myril or Anders to feel different from other children at the school. That was how they trained me to open my wallet without asking too many questions. But after lying on that kitchen floor and hearing my son decide not to come, I finally understood the trick. A child can be loved without letting their parents rob you in the child's name. Cordell did not come looking for me because he missed his father. He came because the bank called. That is a distinction I want you to hear clearly. For days after my stroke, my son did not sit beside my hospital bed. He did not call to ask whether I could move my hand or speak my name. He did not leave a message saying he had been wrong. He did not come. But the moment the mortgage automatic payment stopped, he found time. The call came on a Thursday morning. The bank wanted to know why the payment on the Hattiesburg house had not gone through. $6,000. Same as always. Except this time I was no longer the man quietly keeping Cordell's life from collapsing behind the curtains. Tansy called him first. According to what I learned later, she was nearly screaming, not because her children's grandfather had almost died. She was screaming because the house had suddenly become their problem. By noon, they were on the road. I can picture that car ride easily. Tansy blaming Cordell, Cordell blaming me, both of them building the same story they had used for years. Holly was confused. Holly was dramatic. Holly was being difficult. Holly just needed to be handled carefully. They drove to the hospital expecting to find an old man in a bed, weak, medicated, grateful for a visit, easy to apologize to and easy to soften. But Tabitha was waiting for them at the front desk. I had asked her for one favor, and she gave it to me with a perfectly straight face. Mr. Greaves has been transferred to a long-term rehabilitation facility, she told them. No address. No room number. No apology. While they argued at the front desk, Buford was quietly wheeling me through a back corridor to a consultation room I had already reserved for the afternoon. For once in his adult life, my son needed me. And for once in mine, I was unavailable. I left the hospital on day 11. Not through the front doors where Cordell might have been waiting with questions he had not earned the right to ask. Not back to the house in Pascagoula where every wall remembered how long I had been lonely. Marquis had arranged a private rehabilitation facility outside Pensacola. Small enough that the nurses learned your name in the first week. Quiet enough that a man could hear himself think again. For 6 weeks I lived there. I learned how to hold a spoon with my right hand. I learned how to button a shirt without cursing loudly enough for the nurses to hear. I learned how to walk on a treadmill while my leg dragged behind me like it was still deciding whether it wanted to stay. Some mornings I wanted to quit. Some mornings I looked at the rubber ball they gave me to squeeze and hated it more than I had hated any storm, any blown engine, any rusted hull in my entire working life. But I squeezed it anyway. Because while I was slowly learning to move my fingers again, Cordell was learning what silence feels like from the other side. No direct phone number. No home address. No hospital room to demand answers from. No father answering on the second ring with patience in his voice. Marquis handled every communication. Buford handled the practical things that needed a man with a truck and no tolerance for nonsense. And then one Sunday afternoon, I picked up the phone and called my daughter in Alaska. Aubrielle. The one who had put as much physical distance as possible between herself and a family that had never believed her. I expected coldness when she picked up. I expected the careful, polished distance of a daughter who had been told one too many times that she was being too sensitive. Instead, she answered and said, "Daddy?" Just that one word. And I broke harder than I had on the kitchen floor. The note I left for Cordell was not written in anger. I know that might surprise you. Anger burns hot and fast, and by then I was too exhausted for fire. I wrote it on a Thursday morning at the rehabilitation facility, sitting near a window where the sunlight came in soft and low across the blanket on my knees. My right hand still trembled, so I wrote slowly. Every letter cost me something. I gave the sealed envelope to the nursing supervisor and told her to place it on my bed only if my son came looking for me in person. Not if he sent Tansy. Not if he called. Only if he came himself. 6 weeks after my stroke, he did. By then, the money pressure had become impossible to ignore. The cars were gone. The mortgage letter had arrived. The country club account had gone cold. His salary had stopped. For the first time in his adult life, Cordell Grives was standing in a storm without his father, holding the roof over him. The nurses told me later that he walked in demanding to know my room number. Not asking. Demanding. So they gave it to him. He opened the door expecting to find his father. He found a strip bed and one envelope on the pillow. Inside, I wrote him the truth. I told him I had heard him at Singing River Hospital. I heard him tell the nurse I had been crying wolf. I heard him say to use my Medicare and do whatever they needed to do. I heard him ask them not to call again because his wife was on her 3rd glass of wine and his daughter was about to perform. I told him the last time he had a real chance to call me his father, he had chosen instead to call me the old man. Then I gave him the sentence I knew would follow him longer than any unpaid bill. You wanted me to be old without bothering you, Cordell, so now you can be my son without having me. I am told his hands shook when he read it. Good. Mine shook when I wrote it. The fallout did not come like an explosion. It came like water rising quietly under a locked door.
Cordell tried at first to maintain the appearance of control. That had always been his particular talent. He could stand in a burning room and complain about the smoke, as though the fire had nothing to do with him.
He called Marquis' office 12 times in 1 week. He sent emails full of words like misunderstanding and temporary and family matter. He left voicemails that started out angry, turned frightened, and ended in the soft voice he always used when he wanted something. Marquis answered none of them personally. Every response went through paper, certified paper, legal paper, paper that did not care how loud he got. The salvage industry in Mississippi is smaller than most people realize. The men who cut steel, tow wreckage, repair docks, and pull shrimp boats off sandbars after hurricanes all know each other. They drink coffee in the same diners. They buy parts from the same suppliers. They hear things. When Cordell began looking for another position that matched what he had been drawing from my company, doors closed before he even touched the handles. Nobody said the reason out loud. They did not have to. A man who had drawn $190,000 a year from his father's business without showing up was not the kind of man serious operators wanted near equipment, payroll, or contracts. Eventually, he took a job selling boat insurance in Biloxi. Honest work if a man is humble enough for it. Cordell was not. He made about 1/5 of what he had been used to, and every paycheck reminded him of the life he had mistaken for something he had built himself. Then the house went. The foreclosure did what foreclosure does. It turned private shame into public record. Neighbors noticed the boxes being carried out. Tansy's friends noticed the missing Sunday brunch photographs. The country club women, the same ones who had complimented her handbags and her charity committee work, stopped making room at their tables for someone whose account had gone unpaid. 8 months after the house was lost, Tansy filed for divorce. Not because she had developed a conscience, because the money was gone. Her family in Texas took her in. The children stayed with Cordell, not out of any particular tenderness on Tansy's part, but because her new situation did not include space for a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. That was the empire my son had been building. Remove my money. Nothing left but receipts. Aubrielle flew down from Alaska 3 days after our phone call. I had imagined her arrival many different ways during the weeks before she came. I thought maybe she would be stiff and careful. Maybe she would sit beside my bed with the quiet, preserved anger of a woman who had been right for too long and trusted too little. But when she walked into the rehabilitation room and crossed the floor toward me, she was not angry first. She was my daughter. She put both arms around me gently, as though I were made of something fragile that she had been waiting a long time to hold again. I felt her shaking before I heard her cry. "Daddy," she whispered, "you scared me." That word almost destroyed me entirely. Daddy. Cordell had called me the old man. Aubrielle called me what I had once been before money, and silence, and unchecked years had turned every conversation into a negotiation. She stayed through the hardest weeks of my recovery. Every morning she sat in the therapy room while I practiced lifting my right hand from the table. When I got frustrated and knocked the foam ball onto the floor, she picked it up and set it back in front of me without a word. When I said I was tired, she said, "I know." When I said I was done, she said, "No, you're not." She had her mother's patience, but not her mother's softness. Aubrielle did not allow me to hide behind age, grief, or guilt. One evening after dinner, she asked me the question I had been avoiding all month. "Did you know what Cordell was doing?" I looked at my crooked hand lying on the blanket. "Not all of it," I said. "No." She nodded slowly, eyes wet but steady. "Mama tried to tell you. I tried to tell you." I swallowed hard. "You were right," I said. For the first time in years, my daughter did not have to prove the truth to me. I finally handed it back to her. By the time I left that facility, I knew one thing with a certainty I had not felt in years. I was not going back to Pascagoula. That house had been mine for decades, mine and Purine's. Its walls had heard our arguments, our laughter, our prayers, the sound of children running down the hallway before life taught them how to close doors quietly behind themselves. Every floorboard had a memory pressed into it. Every window looked out on some version of a man I used to be. But memory is not always home. Sometimes memory is just a room that keeps asking you to bleed in the same place. So I sold it. I sold the boat too. The one I had always promised myself I would fix up when I finally slowed down enough to enjoy it. Turns out, slowing down arrives differently than a man expects. I did not need another machine to repair. I had spent a lifetime repairing things that should have been allowed to sink. Then came the salvage yard itself. Greaves Marine Salvage had been built from mud, rust, rope, diesel smoke, and stubbornness. I knew every dent in every piece of equipment on that property. I knew where the riverbank softened after hard rain. I knew which men you could trust with a cutting torch and which ones needed watching after payday. A competitor had been trying to buy me out for 10 years. This time, I let him. The number surprised even Marquis when the deal closed. I gave half of everything to Aubrielle. She tried to refuse at first. She said she did not want to benefit from pain. I told her it was not pain. It was her mother's wish finally catching up with us. The other half I carried south. Purine had purchased a small piece of land years earlier on the Pacific side of Costa Rica, north of a town called Nosara. I had never seen it. She had left it waiting, like a lantern she lit before she went, so I would have something to walk toward. So I went. I built a 2-bedroom house with a porch facing the water and a kitchen window above the sink, because after spending most of my life staring at rust invoices and river mud, I decided I wanted to wash a coffee cup while looking at the Pacific. For the first time in longer than I could measure, I was not repairing something broken. I was building somewhere to live. A few months after I settled in, Cordell found me. I still do not know exactly how. Marquis suspected he had paid someone. I had a satellite phone for genuine emergencies, and only 4 people in the world had that number. Cordell was not one of them. The voicemail came just after sunset. I was sitting on the porch watching pelicans skim low over the water when the phone buzzed on the small wooden table beside my glass. I saw the unknown number and let it ring out. Then the notification appeared. His voice sounded older than I remembered. Not wiser, not softer, older. Like consequences had started charging interest on a debt he had been carrying without knowing it. "Dad," he said. Then a long silence. "I'm sorry." 2 words. 2 words I had waited what felt like half my life to hear. 2 words that should have opened something in me. Instead, they landed on the porch between us like a coin dropped into an empty well. He said he had started therapy. He said he understood things differently now. He said Tansy was gone, the children missed me, and he wanted to bring them down to visit. Then he said the sentence that told me he still did not understand the most important thing. He said, "Dad, it's time you came back to the family." Not, "Are you safe?" Not, "What did I do to you?" Not, "What do you need?" Just come back, as if I had wandered away from a duty I owed him. Even in his apology, he was bringing leverage, my grandchildren, my weakness, my heart. I listened to that voicemail 3 times, not because I was tempted, because I wanted to be absolutely sure I heard every word clearly before I answered it with the only honest response I had left. I stood up. I walked down from the porch to the water's edge. I waded in until the waves reached my knees. Then I threw that satellite phone as far out into the Pacific as my right arm would carry it. It made one small, clean splash. The ocean closed over it, and I stood there in the water for a long time, listening to the sound of nothing requiring anything from me. People hear a story like mine, and they always want to know one thing. Did I forgive him? I understand the question, I really do. Forgiveness is a word people like to hand to old men as if age automatically transforms pain into wisdom and betrayal into something soft enough to fold away in a drawer. They picture me on this porch, watching the Pacific, and they want me to say that because Cordell sounded sorry, I opened the door and let him walk back in with flowers and therapy words and 2 confused children. But forgiveness is not the same thing as access. And love is not the same thing as permission. I love my grandchildren. I have never stopped loving them, not for a single day. Myril and Anders are innocent in all of this, and some nights when the wind is quiet, I wonder what they remember about me. Maybe birthday cards. Maybe the smell of the old truck. Maybe a grandfather who always slipped them extra dessert when their mother was not looking. That part still hurts in a place I have not found a name for yet. But I will not allow Cordell to use them as a key.
If Myril and Anders find me when they are grown, when they can choose with their own eyes and not through their father's guilt or their father's script, my door will open. I will sit with them on this porch. I will answer every question I can bear to answer. I will make them coffee or lemonade, depending on how old they are when they arrive.
But I will not be summoned, not by Cordell. Not by an apology that arrived only after the money disappeared. I spent 50 years picking up the phone on the 2nd ring. Throwing it into the ocean was the first honest answer I ever gave him. The stroke changed my body, yes. What it changed most was my definition of family. Before that Tuesday in March, I thought family was blood, a last name, a chair at the holiday table, a person who could wound you and still expect a place in your life, because decades ago you had held them as a baby and promised never to let go. I was wrong. Family is not what a person is called. Family is what a person does when your voice breaks on the phone. Corrine, the 911 dispatcher, had never met me a single day in her life. She stayed. Tabitha, the nurse, owed me nothing. She fought for me. Buford drove 40 minutes in a dying truck at an hour, when most men his age were already in bed. He signed the papers. Marquis had carried my wife's final protection in a sealed envelope and honored it exactly when the moment came. Aubrielle flew from Alaska. Not to say I told you so, though God knows she had earned that right many times over, but to sit beside me while I learned how to be myself again. That is family. Not perfect people, not people who never failed you, but people who walk towards you when life has knocked you flat and everyone else is pretending not to hear the phone ring. I spent too many years confusing obligation with love. I thought being a good father meant answering every call, writing every check, smoothing every road, forgiving every insult before anyone had even apologized for it. I thought if I just kept giving, Cordell would eventually understand what he had. I thought generosity was the same thing as being needed. I thought being needed was the same thing as being loved. But love without a backbone is not love. It is rent. You pay it month after month, year after year, until the people living under your roof begin to believe the house is theirs. They stop seeing sacrifice. They start seeing obligation. They stop saying thank you. They start asking why the payment is late. That was Cordell. But if I am going to tell this story honestly, I have to say something harder. I helped make him that way. Every time I wrote a check when I should have asked a question, I watered the weed. Every time Purine warned me and I made excuses, I watered the weed. Every time Aubrielle tried to tell me something was wrong, and I told myself she was too far away to understand, I watered the weed. I thought I was being a good father. I was being afraid. Afraid that if I said no, my son would love me less. Afraid that if I stopped writing the checks, I would lose my seat at his table. Afraid that having boundaries would make me cruel. But a father who never says no does not raise a grateful son. He raises a man who believes yes is his birthright. That was the arithmetic I got wrong for almost 50 years. And on a Tuesday afternoon, on a cold kitchen floor with pickle juice soaking through my shirt, life finally corrected the numbers. These days I wake before the sun. Not because an alarm tells me to. Not because a phone is ringing with some emergency that turns out to be a bill wearing my son's voice. I wake because the ocean changes color around 5:30 in the morning, and if a man is fortunate enough to live where the Pacific turns silver before it turns blue, he ought to be awake to see it. My house is small. 2 bedrooms, 1 porch, a kitchen with a window above the sink. There is a boy from the village named Alicio who comes by on Saturdays to help with the fence and the garden and whatever else an old man pretends he can still manage alone. He is 14, thin as a fishing pole, and serious in the way boys get when they are trying to become men before life has finished asking their permission. I pay him more than he asks. He brings me bread his grandmother bakes on Friday mornings. He calls me Don Holly. The first time he said it, I had to turn toward the water so he would not see what it did to my face. My right arm is about 90% of what it used to be. Some mornings it aches. Some mornings my fingers feel slow getting started. But I can pour coffee. I can write in my journal. I can break bread with both hands at the table. The doctor in San Jose says my blood pressure looks better than it has in years. I sleep 8 hours. Imagine that. For decades, I had believed peace was something a man earned only after everyone else in his life was finally satisfied. Turns out, peace begins the day you stop letting other people spend your life for you. Love without a backbone is not love. Sometimes love is measured by the moment you stop paying for someone else's cruelty with your own peace. My name is Hollister Greaves. I am 72 years old. I almost died while my son listened to my granddaughter play piano and decided it was more important than my voice on the phone. But I lived. I left. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, no one in this world owns the peace I wake up with. Not my son. Not my past. Not even my grief. Just me. And that is enough. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Have you ever had to choose peace over family? Have you ever been the person on that kitchen floor, calling someone who decided not to come? I read every comment, every single one. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories about betrayal, survival, and the kind of quiet justice that finally brings a person home to themselves. You deserve that kind of peace too. Do not wait until the floor is cold under your cheek. Decide on a good day. Decide while your hands still work.